Frederick Allard, a name that would forever become synonymous with exploitation and deceit, shocked the nation when the true extent of his predatory behavior came to light. Allard, a seemingly ordinary 73-year-old landlord, had turned his position of power into a means of preying on the vulnerable, demanding sexual favors in exchange for a roof over their heads. His victims, often young women in dire financial straits, found themselves trapped in a web of coercion and fear. This essay delves into the disturbing details of Allard's crimes, the investigation that brought him to justice, and the ongoing fight against sex for rent schemes. The revelations about Allard's actions came to public attention through an undercover investigation, which exposed his predatory tactics. This investigation, led by a tenacious reporter, revealed the extent of Allard's manipulations and the suffering he inflicted on his tenants. As we explore this case, it is essential to acknowledge the bravery of Allard's victims, whose courage in coming forward played a pivotal role in securing justice. Frederick Allard did not become a predator overnight. His actions were the culmination of years of honing his manipulative skills, exploiting the vulnerabilities of those around him. Owning multiple properties in Tidworth, Wiltshire, he was in a position of power over his tenants. Advertising rooms on popular websites like Spare Room, Allard specifically targeted young women, often those in desperate financial situations. What set Allard apart from other unscrupulous landlords was his methodical approach to exploitation. He was patient, taking time to build a facade of trust and reliability before revealing his true intentions. Once the women were ensnared, he would begin his demands, initially subtle, but progressively more explicit. This insidious form of control made it incredibly difficult for the victims to break free, creating a cycle of abuse that could have continued indefinitely if not for the courageous intervention of the undercover reporter. The victims of Frederick Allard's predatory scheme were young women, often at the most vulnerable points in their lives. Many were students, single mothers, or recent immigrants, each grappling with financial instability and the pressing need for affordable housing. Allard's advertisements promised a solution to their problems, but what they encountered was a nightmare they could never have anticipated.
I had moved to the area for a job, hoping to start anew. When I responded to Allard's advertisement, I was initially relieved to find a seemingly kind landlord. However, this relief quickly turned to dread as Allard's true intentions became apparent.
The emotional scars left by Allard's exploitation were deep. Victims frequently spoke of the shame and guilt they felt, emotions that were weaponized by Allard to maintain control over them.
The shame and guilt were overwhelming. He made me feel like I had no other options, like I was completely trapped.
This psychological manipulation was a key component of his predatory behavior, ensuring that his victims remained ensnared in his web of deceit. The psychological toll of such exploitation cannot be understated. The tide began to turn against Frederick Allard when a determined undercover reporter decided to investigate the rumors of his predatory behavior. This reporter, whose identity remains protected for safety reasons, had heard whispers of landlords exploiting tenants, but Allard's name came up repeatedly. The investigation began with a series of covert operations to gather evidence. The reporter posed as a potential tenant, responding to one of Allard's seemingly innocent advertisements. Armed with hidden cameras and audio recording devices, the reporter was prepared to document any incriminating interactions.
During our first meeting, I was struck by Allard's outwardly polite demeanor. He presented himself as a kindly old landlord, eager to help someone in need of affordable housing. However, as the conversation progressed, Allard's true nature began to surface.
The undercover reporter's breakthrough came during a subsequent meeting where Allard explicitly stated his demands for sexual favors in exchange for reduced rent. This interaction, captured on camera, provided the irrefutable evidence needed to expose Allard's predatory behavior. Armed with the damning evidence from the undercover investigation, the reporter collaborated with law enforcement to set up a sting operation.
The goal was to catch Frederick Allard in the act, ensuring that there would be no room for denial or legal maneuvering.
The sting was set in motion when the undercover reporter arranged another meeting with Allard. This time, law enforcement officers were stationed nearby, ready to intervene at the crucial moment.
The tension was palpable as the reporter once again entered the predator's lair, knowing that this encounter could be the key to bringing him down.
Every word, every gesture was recorded, with the officers listening intently for the signal to move in.
As expected, Allard wasted no time in reiterating his demands. He believed he was in control, unaware that his every move was being watched.
The moment came when he made a particularly explicit proposition, and the signal was given. Law enforcement officers stormed the property, catching Allard completely off guard.
The evidence gathered by the undercover reporter was instrumental in ensuring that Allard could not evade justice.
Frederick Allard's arrest marked the beginning of a legal battle that would see him face multiple charges for his heinous actions.
The charges brought against him were serious, reflecting the gravity of his predatory behavior and the suffering he had caused.
Allard was charged with 3 counts of causing or inciting prostitution for gain and sexual assault. These charges were based on the evidence gathered during the undercover investigation, as well as testimonies from several victims who had bravely come forward.
The legal team worked tirelessly to compile a comprehensive case against Allard, ensuring that every aspect of his exploitation was documented and presented in court.
The legal proceedings began with Allard's arraignment, where he was formally charged and entered a plea. Unsurprisingly, he pleaded not guilty, maintaining a facade of innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him.
This plea set the stage for a contentious trial, where both the prosecution and defense would present their arguments in a bid to sway the jury.
The trial of Frederick Allard began with a flurry of media attention, as the public eagerly followed the developments of this high-profile case. The prosecution opened their case with a detailed account of Allard's predatory behavior, supported by the evidence gathered during the undercover investigation. The video recordings in particular were a powerful tool, providing irrefutable proof of Allard's demands for sexual favors in exchange for reduced rent. The defense, however, sought to undermine the credibility of the victims and the evidence. They argued that the interactions were consensual and that the victims had willingly entered into these arrangements. It was a strategy designed to cast doubt and create confusion, but the prosecution was prepared. They countered with compelling testimonies from the victims, each detailing their experiences of coercion and abuse. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on the victims became evident. Reliving their traumatic experiences in front of a packed courtroom was incredibly challenging, but their resolve never wavered. Their bravery in facing their abuser and recounting their stories was a testament to their strength and determination. It was their courage that ultimately swayed the jury, highlighting the true nature of Allard's predatory actions. The most heart-wrenching moments of Frederick Allard's trial came when the victims took the stand.
One victim described how Allard lured her under the pretense of giving her a massage.
Another victim shared a similar story.
The victims' testimonies were supported by undercover recordings. The combination of testimonies and evidence created a compelling case. Their courage was instrumental in securing a conviction. The culmination of the trial came with the sentencing of Frederick Allard. The courtroom was filled with anticipation as Judge R. Taylor prepared to deliver the final verdict. Judge Taylor condemned Allard's actions, describing him as a predator who exploited his victims. Allard was sentenced to 30 months in prison. He was also placed on the sex offenders register for 10 years. For the victims, the sentencing was a moment of vindication. It brought a sense of closure, even as they continued to grapple with emotional scars. The conviction of Frederick Allard was met with relief and calls for action. For the victims, it was a moment of justice after significant trauma. The case garnered widespread media attention. Public reactions were swift, expressing outrage at the exploitation.
Wiltshire police praised the victims for their courage and resilience.
The undercover reporter was lauded for their bravery.
The case saw renewed efforts to raise awareness and support victims. Campaigns were launched to educate the public about exploitation. The case of Frederick Allard has had a lasting impact, spurring ongoing efforts to combat sex for rent schemes and protect vulnerable individuals. Advocacy groups, legal experts, and policymakers have come together to address the issue and implement measures to prevent such exploitation. These efforts are crucial in ensuring that the lessons learned from Allard's case lead to meaningful change. One of the key areas of focus has been raising awareness about the signs of sex for rent exploitation. Public campaigns have been launched to educate tenants and landlords about their rights and responsibilities. These campaigns emphasize the importance of reporting any suspicious behavior and provide resources for those who may be at risk. By increasing awareness, it is hoped that potential victims will be better equipped to recognize and avoid predatory schemes.